There's a quiet kind of heartbreak that lingers long after a breakup, when you see the person you loved, shared everything with, suddenly act like none of it mattered. They're out having fun, posting happy pictures, living as if you never existed, and you wonder, was it all one-sided? In today's video, we'll explore a psychological pattern many people face after breaking up with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, why they can seem so unaffected, detached, or even indifferent after the breakup. But what's really going on beneath that calm exterior? This isn't a video about chasing someone or excusing cold behavior. It's about helping you understand the emotional mechanisms behind avoidance so you can stop blaming yourself and begin to heal from a place of self-worth. If you've ever felt abandoned without clarity or are struggling to understand how someone moved on so fast, this video is for you. Hit subscribe and stay until the end, because you'll learn it's not that you weren't enough, it's that they weren't ready to face themselves. Outward behavior. They seem completely unaffected. After the breakup, you wake up in shock. Your heart's still beating, shaky, flooded with memories and unanswered questions. Then you open social media, and there they are, smiling at some unfamiliar place, with friends, maybe even with someone new. They look vibrant, even radiant, as if they've just been freed from a burden. That's one of the deepest shocks for someone who loved sincerely. You're not just dealing with loss, you're confronting a chilling indifference from someone who once knew your heart. And the question inevitably rises, was I ever real to them? That feeling of being erased from the story cuts deep when someone who once meant everything now acts like you never existed. It doesn't just hurt, it makes you question your own worth. But the first thing you need to remember is this. What you're seeing is a surface layer, not the truth. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, this isn't a sign they're genuinely fine. It's a coping strategy, emotional avoidance in motion. And they don't face pain head on. They bury it beneath activities, distractions, and an image of strength. Their quick rebound, their trips, their cheerful photos. None of this is evidence that they've moved on healthily. It's a defense mechanism, triggered when intimacy becomes too close, too deep, too real. Avoidance learned early that emotions equals danger. As children, they may have been emotionally neglected, left to soothe themselves. So as adults, they don't trust vulnerability. And when a relationship begins to reach real emotional depth, they retreat. Not because you did something wrong, but because you got too close. So no, their silence is not heartlessness, it's fear. And their smiling exterior, just a mask, one carefully crafted to trick themselves into believing everything's fine, so they don't have to feel the truth underneath. They may jump into a new relationship immediately, but not because you weren't enough. It's because they can't bear to sit in the emptiness. So they monkey branch, leaping from one person to the next, hoping someone else will fill the void they refuse to face within. This doesn't mean you didn't matter. It means you loved someone who wasn't ready to receive it. If you're seeing them laughing, moving forward, living their best life, understand this isn't a rejection of you. It's a rejection of themselves, of their own vulnerability. And that's not your fault. You can't control how someone else confronts their pain, but you can choose how you confront yourself. You can choose not to measure your value by the expressions of someone who emotionally shut down. You can choose to believe that real love is never wasted, even when it's unreturned. Self-respect isn't retaliation. Self-respect is knowing who you are and not letting someone else's avoidance define it. It's standing in the truth that you loved with your whole heart, and you deserve someone who can meet you there, awake and accountable. And if you've ever wondered, am I worth someone stopping, feeling, and facing themselves for? The answer is yes. But not everyone is strong enough to be that person. And because you love deeply, their reaction, that outward coldness, the appearance of being unaffected, doesn't just hurt. It feels like a personal insult. But if you can set the heartbreak aside for just a moment and look more deeply, you'll see they're not emotionless. They've chosen not to feel. 2. Why do they do this? Because they don't process emotions. They avoid them. This is not someone who's stronger than you. They're not more mature or more resilient. Quite the opposite. They're someone who has learned, often since childhood, to systematically disconnect from their inner world. They were taught through neglect, rejection, or emotional absence that emotions are dangerous and vulnerability is unsafe. For avoidantly attached people, emotional closeness doesn't bring comfort, it triggers fear. The more love they feel, the more they panic, because love demands presence. It demands self-awareness. And when that fear gets too loud, they hit the emotional eject button, they deactivate, they pull back, shut down, convince themselves that they didn't care that much, or that the relationship wasn't that deep, or that they're totally fine. All of it, just to protect themselves from the tidal wave of feelings they don't know how to handle. And they don't just disconnect from you, they disconnect from themselves. They bury, suppress, and actively avoid thinking about the breakup, the pain they're in, or the pain they caused you. Why? Because guilt, sadness, and helplessness are emotions they were never allowed to process growing up. When they cried, no one came. When they needed, no one noticed. So they learned to lock their feelings away, isolate, and call it independence. But the truth is this: running isn't healing, and silence doesn't mean peace. When you ask, why don't they seem sad? The answer may be, they are sad, but they don't give themselves permission to feel it. Because if they did, they'd have to face the fact that they destroyed something good, that they hurt someone who loved them. And that kind of reflection requires an emotional capacity they haven't developed, so they take the easier route. Avoid introspection, avoid emotion, and stay distracted. Work, social media, someone new, it's all just emotional anesthesia to keep from facing what's inside. This doesn't take away your pain, but it gives you perspective. You weren't abandoned because you weren't enough. You were left because they couldn't go deeper with themselves. Self-respect isn't about trying to make them regret losing you. It's about recognizing the truth and refusing to erase yourself just to be loved again. You can't force someone to grow, but you can refuse to let their unhealed wounds become the reason you forget your worth. Once you understand that they're avoiding emotions rather than genuinely okay, a natural question arises. But why? Why would an adult be so afraid of emotions that they'd rather lose the relationship than feel? The answer isn't in the present. It's buried deep in the past, in the earliest years of attachment development. Sen, the root of the behavior, childhood attachment wounds. Avoidantly attached individuals often grow up in environments where their emotional needs were not seen or met. They may not have been overtly abused, but what they lacked was just as damaging emotional attunement from their caregivers. When a child cries and is ignored, when they reach for comfort and are turned away, when they express sadness, fear, or need and are told, don't be dramatic, handle it yourself, be strong, that child learns a harsh truth. Expressing emotion leads to rejection or shame. Over time, this becomes a belief system. Feelings are dangerous. I can only rely on myself. If I need someone, I will be hurt. And so, a protective strategy forms. Disconnect from emotions to survive. That wounded child becomes an adult who appears logical, independent, high-functioning, but is, in truth, emotionally avoidant. They may succeed at work, control situations, maintain distance, but the heart remains untouched. Then love comes along. Someone sees them, loves them, draws closer, and the old fear awakens. The fear of being abandoned just when they start to need someone. Intimacy, to them, is a trigger, not a comfort. This creates a painful inner conflict. They love and pull away, crave closeness but fear it, long to connect but can't tolerate vulnerability. Inside, they're caught in a battle. One part wants bonding, the other runs from engulfment and dependence. You likely felt this the moments they opened up, followed by days of withdrawal, the deep talks, then sudden silence. You tiptoed, softened your voice, bent your needs just to keep the connection alive. But in truth, you were living inside the architecture of a wound they refused to face. And the saddest part, they're not trying to hurt you. They're simply running an unconscious pattern scripted long before you ever met. But just because it's unintentional doesn't mean it's not harmful. Self-respect here means recognizing you didn't cause that wound and it's not your job to heal it. Loving someone who doesn't yet know how to love themselves can become a slow erosion of your own soul if you're not deeply awake. You can't love someone enough to rewrite their childhood. What you can do and must do is love yourself enough not to become the emotional parent they never had. And if you've ever thought, maybe if I were more patient, more understanding, remember, a healthy love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself just to stay. Once you understand that everything they're doing now is a reaction to old wounds that were never healed, you begin to see more clearly they're not truly living in the present. They're reacting from the past. And after a breakup, instead of staying with the pain, instead of grieving, as you are, they do what they've always done. They avoid. 4. Post-breakup avoidance mechanisms. When a relationship ends, securely attached people often allow themselves to grieve. They cry. They journal. They talk to friends or seek therapy. They move through pain consciously. Avoidants do the opposite. The moment the relationship gets too close, or when they leave but can't bear the guilt or emotional weight, they activate their emotional avoidance system. And the fastest way to do that is to stay so busy that there's no room left to feel. They may dive into work, take on extra hours, launch new projects, accelerate their career, not out of passion, but because work is a safe space they can control. They might also become highly visible on social media, out at events, posting cheerful photos, living their best life. But in truth, this is performance, a distraction from their unprocessed pain. Some avoidants go even further, jumping into new relationships almost immediately, not because they're ready, but because they don't know how to sit alone in emotional emptiness. At a deeper level, this is a form of monkey branching, swinging from one branch to the next without ever fully letting go. They haven't emotionally detached from the previous connection, but they also won't stay and work through it. They enter something new not to build, but to temporarily anchor themselves and avoid emotional collapse. And you, the one left behind, see all of this. You see them glowing, succeeding, moving on. And you wonder, have they truly forgotten me? But the truth is, they haven't forgotten. They're running. Here's the problem. Emotions can't be erased, only delayed. And when the noise dies down, when the work slows, when shallow connections don't satisfy the loneliness, and the memory of you will return. But by then, you may have moved far beyond them. Self-respect isn't waiting for them to realize how much you mattered. Self-respect is seeing their avoidance clearly and not using it as a mirror to measure your own worth. You are not less because they moved on quickly. They simply chose the easier path. You had the courage to feel. They did not. And that makes you stronger, even if it doesn't look like it right now. Because the one brave enough to sit with emptiness is the one who actually grows. And eventually, after all the distractions, the rushed connections, the carefully curated "I'm fine" photos, there will come a moment when they feel the emptiness. But the question that lingers in your heart is often this: do they ever regret it? Do they feel guilty for how they treated me? 5. Do they feel guilt? Possibly, but only when they no longer feel emotionally triggered by you. One of the paradoxes of avoidant attachment is this: they cannot access their true emotions while you're still emotionally present. As long as you're texting, seeking closure, or even quietly waiting, they feel the pressure to maintain their emotional firewall to stay shut off so nothing gets in. Only when you genuinely withdraw, not just in action, but in energy, and no longer serve as their emotional mirror, do they begin to feel safe enough to remember. But here's the critical distinction. Remembering is not the same as remorse. They may miss your warmth, miss the way you cared, your consistency, your emotional presence. They may long for the feeling of being deeply seen, but that doesn't necessarily mean they feel genuine guilt for how they treated you, because true guilt requires self-reflection. It demands emotional courage, the willingness to look at their own behavior, name the harm they caused, and take responsibility for it. But avoidants often avoid even that, because for them, owning their mistakes equals facing deep, buried shame, and that's a feeling they've spent a lifetime running from. So many times, what we mistake for guilt is actually nostalgia for benefits they've lost. Your stability, your devotion, your unconditional presence, or even just the emotional validation they once received from you. They miss you, but often in the way an addict misses their emotional high, not because they're ready to be accountable or present. And if you return too soon, you may find yourself back in the old role. The soother, the emotional caretaker, the one who gives without being met. That's the loop, the revolving door you keep entering, hoping this time will be different, only to be left again by someone still unready to stay. Self-respect now isn't about waiting for an apology or hoping for an awakening. It's about discerning between real growth and recycled behavior. It's asking, do you miss me or do you miss what I gave you? You weren't born to be someone's emotional service provider. Love is not about suffering long enough to finally be chosen. Real love comes with awareness, responsibility, and action, not just delayed emotional echoes. If they truly feel remorse, you won't have to guess. Because grown adults don't just feel, they take steps to repair. And if they don't, maybe they miss you, but not enough to become different. So what happens next? After all the avoidance, the delays, the lack of clear remorse from the one who left you, find yourself at a crossroads. Either keep waiting for them to change, or you choose a radically different path, the path where you return to yourself. This is where we enter the realm of Stoic philosophy, a school of thought that doesn't teach you how to control others, but teaches you how to govern yourself, especially when others refuse to act as you'd hope. The avoidant doesn't apologize, doesn't explain, doesn't repair, they leave. And if they come back, it's not because they've changed, but because they have no one else to anchor to. They may still be cold, still lacking self-awareness, still repeating old patterns, and that's when you need an anchor that is no longer tied to them. The Stoics teach us not to place our peace in the hands of others. They help us separate what's within our control and what isn't. You cannot control how someone loves, whether they apologize, or their ability to self-reflect. But you can control how you respond to their silence, how you interpret their actions, how you keep living, loving, and growing, regardless of whether they return. Epictetus once said, "We are not disturbed by events, but by the views we take of them. So if they never apologize, it doesn't make you less. Only when you tie your worth to their behavior do you feel diminished." From a Stoic perspective, you realize their lack of guilt, their silence, or their permanent absence. It isn't a tragedy, it's a truth. And you don't need to run from the truth. In fact, you stand in it, strong and steady, like an adult with emotional maturity. Stoicism doesn't make you cold, it makes you resilient with a soft heart. You can still miss them, still grieve what didn't become, but you no longer let that define your worth or your path forward. They don't apologize? That's okay. You still deserve healing. They don't acknowledge their mistakes? That's okay. You still have a right to move forward in clarity. They never return? That's okay. You don't need their presence to be whole. When you understand this, you stop needing closure from them. You become the closure. Your quiet decision to live a meaningful life even without them is the strongest ending you could ever write to an old story. In truth, the person who can self-heal isn't the one who never feels pain. It's the one who accepts that not all questions get answered and still chooses to live with kindness. No bitterness, no revenge, no repeating the cycle. Just forward movement with self-respect intact. You don't have to win against them. You only have to win within yourself. Every time you don't reach out, don't chase, don't react to their silence, that's a victory. Quiet, but real. The avoidant may never look back, but you won't need to because you've finally realized your value doesn't depend on being seen by someone who is never ready to truly look. If you've followed this far, it means you're standing at a crucial turning point in your journey of love and self-healing. You've come to understand that not everyone is mature enough to love you the way you deserve. Not everyone can face their emotions and take responsibility, and that is not your fault. Love is not about accepting silence, indifference, or avoidance. Love is not about holding on only when someone is weak or still has a flicker of feeling left. True love is presence, clarity, and mature companionship from both sides. You have the right to choose respect, emotional safety, and honesty in your relationships. You have the right to set boundaries, to not let anyone diminish your value, and to avoid being caught in the whirlpool of ambiguity and instability. Walk forward with self-respect and clear vision. Letting go is not failure. It is opening a door to better things, to healthier and more lasting connections. Your life is the story you write every day. Don't let anyone else steal that pen. You deserve to be loved fully, unconditionally, and without confusion.